Welcome, folks. I'm Sigrid Wright. I am the CEO for the Community Environmental Council. Welcome. You are in the new Environmental Hub. I'll speak about that in a moment. If we could, please. We are on unceded Chumash territory, so I wanted to welcome you to this space. We are taking photos, and we have TVSB here tonight, so just letting folks know you will be on camera. And in terms of just orienting you to the new Environmental Hub, for those of you, if you need to use the restroom, I guess you would go through that room and then go in the back, just go around the back. We opened the Environmental Hub last July, and since then we have offered dozens of, actually we've done over 100, I think it was like 115 events and meetings just last year alone, as well as several dozen community events like this one. And we have a very full agenda for this upcoming season. Do we have that? That's the photography announcement. That's the personal care. That's the hub. Sorry. There's the upcoming events. There's some really interesting ones. You can check them out on our website, which is cecsb.org. So the next couple include, I'm excited about both of these actually. There's a professor out at UCSB, Dr. Trislan Nelson, who's going to come and talk about bikes, and she's a data geek. She's going to talk about that. And then in a completely different personality, a couple weeks later, we have an author of a new book called Beaverland, and she's going to talk about how beavers changed the landscape and what that could mean for our region. Tonight, we are going to talk about an ecological framework for revitalizing our city core. I know you know this, but I want to talk a little bit about how this initiative came about. So first, we moved and opened the Environmental Hub here in July. And one of the things that I most cherish about the role that I play in this organization is that I am surrounded by many of our past executive directors, founders, past presidents, and other alumni. In fact, I'm going to embarrass them a little bit, but please, if you are a current or past board member or founder, could you please stand up for a moment, please? I know there's several in the room. See? So it is a joy and a pleasure. I don't know very many executive directors who get that much support, and it's a joy and a pleasure. And last summer, a number of them, including our founding executive director, Paul Rellis, and our President's Council members, Dennis Allen and Carl Hutter, approached me and said that they had been talking about and thinking about just the revitalization of State Street. And when we placed ourselves here, when we opened the doors here, we were imagining ourselves as kind of anchoring this portion of State Street. So what does that mean exactly? And so they approached with an idea about really exploring what it means to be an environmental leader, modeling environmental kind of revitalization of the downtown region. And so in talking with city's officials, it became clear that there were suggestions coming from the community about the space, but there was really no coherent framework for the visioning process or for developing a plan. And just given our region's environmental background, birthplace of modern environmental movement, as well as the intensity of the environmental impacts that we're all facing, it really seemed obvious that there needed to be some kind of arrangement or guiding framework based on ecological principles. So I'm thrilled tonight that you're going to hear from some of the folks who helped draft the framework, as well as the community leaders who have since joined us in promoting that for adoption. I've already mentioned many of them: Paul Rellis, Dennis Allen, Carl Hutter, also John Steed, John Clark, Rich Unterman, and thank you also to Dave Davis for just supporting the effort. So, and I also want to thank the community leaders who recently joined us to help promote the framework and providing a diversity of expertise, and you will be hearing from many of them this evening. So before we move forward, if I could also recognize, please, the elected officials who are here, because partly we want to engage with you, and I can see two in my line of sight here. So James Carriaca, right there, please. City of Goleta Council, and oh my God, Kristen Snedden. I'm so sorry. My dear friend, Kristen Snedden with the City of Santa Barbara. Oh, you guys, I have too much in my brain at the moment, so thanks. Sorry, Kristen. All right. Is there anyone that I'm not seeing because I don't have my glasses on? You just call it out, please. Mike Jordan, thank you, Mike. I can't see you back there and I don't have my glasses on. City of Santa Barbara City Council. Okay, so we're going to start with another dear friend, Sharon Main. Sharon wanted to introduce herself. She didn't want me to introduce her, so I'm going to have her come up and tee us off. Thanks, Sharon.
Yes, that is me. There is no affiliation there. First of all, welcome, as Sigrid said. We really appreciate you coming out this evening. I have a long history with CEC. There's an ancient picture here from the 80s, but then again, later in my career, I was at CEC and helped to launch their climate resilience program. But now I am a friend of CEC, as I will always be. You can check out, but you can never leave. We had that on a cake one time. So now I am a consultant, and I'm working on a number of resilience and conservation efforts, and many of them are really colliding around this framework that we're going to hear tonight. One specifically is a biodiversity visioning and policy platform, which some of you have participated in some of that. I've been working with the Botanic Garden, who's leading that effort, and I think that those two, our ecological framework and the biodiversity vision framework, really work well together. So tonight, we are going to introduce you to the ecological framework, and that hopefully you will view this as a possible direction for our downtown and for the revitalization of State Street. And perhaps we'll see this and use this as a model for other neighborhoods and other areas in our community. We believe that if the framework is incorporated into our planning and our design and our future policies, that it could indeed transform our communities. We could bring resilience, ecological integrity, and the best of humanity back into our downtown core. So we're leaving plenty of time this evening at the end of some panel speakers that we'll hear from, but we're leaving enough time for questions and for comments because we really do want to get feedback from the community and engage with you. So let's just kick it off here. Okay, so this is our vision. So we envision a city that ensures that the well-being of both people and the environment in the face of the progressing climate crisis. So I think that we all understand that that in the face of the floods and the heat and the extreme rain events that we're experiencing, the coastal erosion from our sea level rise and from the loss of habitat and loss of natural areas, that our cities might need some reimagining. And a vision where we work and where we live and where we socialize and where we do business certainly must consider all these environmental threats, and the infrastructure needs to be resilient in order to remain economically viable. But to truly thrive, we need a vision that must also consider the needs of humans and humanity, where both people and the environment coexist. So we have obviously we want to look at measures that we can take to revitalize downtown, where we need to build resilience to the climate changes, while also fostering really a vibrant city that provides the needs of all residents. So I like just a moment to think about the vision of, we want a place that you don't want to escape from, right? We want a place where you want to live, where you want to stay and hang out after work or after you do your errands, a place that inspires ideas, a place that has places for conversation, a place that embodies art and culture, where native plants and trees are buzzing with wildlife and provide shade and respite, and where the infrastructure and our city systems are really the best examples of ecological functionality and resilience. And as Sigrid mentioned, while we have a long history of environmental leadership and progressive government and very, very active citizens that are willing to voice their concerns at every turn, we don't really have this really cohesive plan that we can follow. So here we are. So we are Really, the core principles that we're basing this ecological framework are really rooted in this 15-minute city concept, which is really an urban planning concept conceived primarily to help reduce greenhouse emissions by decreasing cars and motorized commuter times. But it's also really embracing this livability and really community resilience. And so this is really the foundation of our ecological framework. And our downtown really does need to evolve to be where all essential needs can be met within a 15-minute walk, bike ride, or by public transit. So the key elements, which were listed up here for the framework that are part of the 15-minute city concept, is that people first. And that's meaning that we want to look at policies, regulations, and incentives that really reflect the needs of people to be able to live in a vibrant, fulfilling life. That there is a diversity, a mix of businesses and services and housing. That there is a diverse mobility options that really promote health. So bike paths and safe walking areas and easy access to transit. And that food really bringing people together, and I think we all recognize that that plays such a critical role in communities. Sharing food, participating in the farmers market, and food access really creates well-being for your communities. And then finally, spaces for public gatherings. Festivals and parades and rallies and celebrations and protests. These are all really important components of a civil society. And the plazas and the stages and the spaces like this hub are incredibly important to our community. So I just wanted to say that I think we all recognize that community support and collaboration among a broad range of partners is going to be absolutely critical if we're going to be able to move our framework forward. And we're going to actually need to have a lot of you joining this effort. And so I know that the drafters of this framework have been really growing this circle. There's been efforts to already speak to elected officials, city staffers, key decision makers, and they, as Sigrid mentioned, been seeking the buy-in of a number of organizations and community groups whose missions really align. So I want to get us to dive into some of these very specific points. I'm going to introduce Carl Hutterer, who's going to help lead a panel discussion, and we have all our panelists here this evening. We are going to focus on each of these key concepts of the framework. We're going to look at the infrastructure, housing, transportation, and then incorporating nature. So with that, and again, we'll have question and answers to follow. So Carl? Oh, is it Dennis? You guys have switched back and forth. Okay. Dennis Allen.
Good evening. It's wonderful seeing so many friends here and being in a place to dream about the future of our city and how it can be better. No better place than the hub, which is a great dream in its own right. I was asked after Sigrid started talking to be the moderator tonight, so I'm like the third stringer at the end of the bench that nobody wants to talk to or see, so bear with me. And I invite all of you to help us moderate and get through this, because it's not just getting through it, it's getting a chance for all of you to contribute, to ask questions. The one thing I'm going to be rather diligent about is trying to not have long comments so that we get a lot of people having the chance to speak. So I'd like to invite our panelists to come up, and I will introduce them and then they can come to the mic. We're going to have different slides related to the different principles of our guidelines up where each panel is speaking. Sully, are you coming up too? Oh, okay. So that's a change as well. So. Well, you can see we're well organized tonight. We thought we were. John Clark was going to be the moderator, and he's an excellent moderator, but unfortunately, his mother's going to be in the hospital tonight, so he had a higher calling that really is important. So anyway, we have Alelia Paranto, who is the director of the Sustainability and Resilience Department at the city, and one of the most important departments in my thinking and in relation to what we're trying to accomplish here. Her boss told me one time that he thinks she's going to run the city in a few years. So, We have another wonderful person from the city, Rob Frederick, who is the director of the City Housing Authority. And we had a meeting recently in prep for the panel, and I got so excited in that meeting that I want to stay in touch with him. We have Heather Deutsch, who is the director of MOVE, M-O-V-E, and it's a combination of what was the Santa Barbara Bicycle Coalition and COAST, which is was the Coalition for Alternative Transportation, and now they're joined together. Sully Israel is with the Strong Town Santa Barbara group, which is a chapter really of a national movement of strong towns across the country, and care passionately about a lot of the issues that we're talking about in the framework. And then we have Steve Windhager, who's the executive director, a wonderful one from the Botanic Gardens. So I think we'll start with you, Alelia.
All right. Oh, not John Clark. Not John Clark. Alelia Parento. You can blame my mother, who's at the back of the room, for the name. It's very hard to pronounce, but once you have a couple glasses of wine, it gets a lot easier. Who here knew that our city had a sustainability and resilience department? Council members, you don't count. All right, so a few of you. In 2020, Council made a really bold move to form a sustainability department, and we are sustainability and resilience. We handle both sides of the book. But what's really important about that move is we're actually the largest department per capita in the nation with the largest budget in the nation. And I say that because that's a really important line drawn in the sand, right? This council has prioritized the work that we're discussing today. And though resilience is happening throughout the city organization, certainly not limited to my department, I am going to focus on my department this evening. So the Sustainability and Resilience Department does do a lot of work in the infrastructure and energy space. My divisions I oversee are creeks and water quality, so they are in charge of doing creek remediation, a lot of natural and working lands remediation, water quality management, stormwater capture. So very, very relevant to this conversation, particularly on State Street, but throughout the community. And one really important upcoming program that we're developing is a bioswale demonstration program. Throughout the city, we want to show people how they can really be part of the stormwater solution on their front lawns. Additionally, we're going to do an urban creek trail program. Currently, we have done all of these amazing remediation projects, but really there's no connection, and I think that's part of what Sharon was talking about today. Most people don't know where our remediation projects are. They haven't seen them. They haven't seen the glory that is these lands that have been preserved, and so creating a connection with people so everyone knows where their closest creek is and how they all connect to the ocean. Next, I oversee the Clean Community Division, which manages the city's solid waste utility, a very, very critical piece of this as well, in charge with the state's diversion mandates of 75%, but really looking to reduce waste overall. So looking at source reduction, how do we get people sharing resources and limiting what they send to the landfill or even to the recycling centers in the first place? And then lastly, the Energy and Climate Division. And this is really, really relevant to this particular topic because that division is charged with meeting council's carbon neutrality goal. Your council has a carbon neutrality goal by 2035, which in my world is tomorrow. So we're running as fast as we can toward it, doing really innovative things like our natural gas ban that recently had to be rescinded because a Ninth Circuit panel of judges deemed it preempted state or federal law. But that doesn't mean we stop there, right? When we hit those hurdles, we pivot. So we come back to council with other solutions. And I think that's really important in this conversation, the ability to pivot. We also run Santa Barbara Clean Energy, which is the city's electrical supply organization that we founded in 2021. We took away SCE's ability to choose where our electricity comes from in the city of Santa Barbara, and we said we want to choose because we know where it should come from, and it should be 100% carbon free. So as of 2021, your electricity is carbon free, and that. The really amazing thing about that people don't realize is overnight, when that switch was flipped, 20% of our greenhouse gas emissions were eliminated. additionally, that gives us pathways to create really, really innovative infrastructures that leverage that electricity, electric mobility, electric buildings. All of our major greenhouse gas sources can be solved with clean, local electricity. So we've solved the carbon piece of electricity, but now we want to solve for the local piece. And so we're doing a lot of local distributed energy resources. In fact, when you leave tonight, you might not be able to see it because it'll be dark, but there is the city's first microgrid is being constructed on top of the Granada Garage. We have a 500 kW solar array with a battery system that will provide constant backup to that building, which houses some critical facilities. It's not actually just a garage. It houses some other emergency response facilities. So that is a really great first step. And to do that in a historic downtown was no small feat, and neither will be building a lot of these framework initiatives. But the fact that we're taking that leap and doing these things is really paving that path. Additionally, we're providing energy backup at other critical infrastructures like battery systems at the Cater Water Treatment Plant. The SB Home Power Program, which provides free upfront free solar and battery systems for homeowners so that you can be off the grid during all of the outages that we're experiencing. And lastly, that's all climate mitigation. We also have climate adaptation. Some of the worst changes are already happening. So we're combating sea level rise by rethinking our utilities downtown and rethinking how we build things. So I think as we progress down this framework, it's really important that we're not just thinking about the problems of today, but we're thinking about the problems of tomorrow and being sort of forward thinking in how we develop that infrastructure. And then lastly, because I'm sure I'm out of time, the one thing that blankets all of the work we do is equity. And I can't say enough about that. Equity. We have to bring our entire community along, and so we're doing a lot of work in terms of resource allocation, making sure that everyone has access to electric cars, electric bikes, electric homes, education, training as they need it. We're building resilience hubs throughout the city, and just making sure that everyone's taken care of. And so that is definitely a community partnership. Gatherings like these help us get the word out about these initiatives, and so I look forward to being part of this conversation. Thank you.
Rob, Frederick, come on up.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Good to see so many friends as well here, and can't believe you all gave up watching the State of the Union address to be here with me. Anyhow, I'm been asked to talk a little bit about housing, and for those of you that don't know me or what the Housing Authority is all about, I've been with the agency for 28 years now, and we were formed in 1969 by the city of Santa Barbara as a separate public agency to address affordable housing needs for the community. And for me, everything's interrelated, right? Housing, transportation, all of this stuff that you're hearing tonight is connected. But for me, housing is foundational. And if you don't have appropriate, affordable, safe housing for your residents, everything else begins to fall apart. So that's one of the reasons why I'm still with the Housing Authority. We have a lot to do. We haven't done enough. We've done a lot. We've developed over 1,460 units throughout the city, spread throughout the city. And we've expanded our mission to not just serve low income, but also moderate and middle income households. Now that income bracket is a tough nut to crack because there's no subsidy available for that, unless the city gives you a piece of land to build on, which they did for us on Carrillo Castillo, which we're going to make the best of, to build that moderate and middle income housing. So thank you to Councilmember Jordan and Councilmember Sneddon for your support of that. So our mission, I mentioned our mission, and it's to create safe, affordable, quality housing opportunities for families and individuals while promoting self-sufficiency and revitalization. that last term, revitalization, is so important, and it's how things are tied in here. We know that the downtown core, the central business district, needs to be revitalized. And one way you can do that is to bring housing along the State Street corridor, and that in and of itself will bring people downtown and create that vibrancy that we need. And so we need to look at doing things in the right way, because Santa Barbara is facing a lot of vulnerabilities and challenges due to changing market conditions with less demand for commercial retail and office space, climate change, coupled with unmet demand for housing. So how can we, as affordable housing developers, be a part of this effort that CEC is creating in their sustainability and revitalization efforts? And part of that is some of my thoughts are that we need to continue to increase densities to provide housing where people work and stop the commute, get people out of their vehicles. We need more Casa de las Fuentes developments like we did at the corner of Castillo and Carrillo Street on the other side, where we're going to build the moderate and middle income housing. That we have a preference for people not to own a car there. They get selected first. And only about half the parking spaces are ever used there because people are willing to give up their vehicle if they can live there. They have to also work within a geographic boundary so that they can use alternative forms of transportation, bike, walk, take the public transit system. And that is, we're looking for that in every development that we do to discourage automobile use in our new developments. We also, in order to create more units on a single lot area that's really hard to come by in a built-out city, is we do need to increase building heights somewhat. I mean, that is a huge tension in our community, right? Where how high do you go? What's it for? But if we're going to build smaller units, we need higher plate heights. So we do need to break above those limits that have been set previously, but I don't think we need to break through too high. And I think we should allow those increased heights, especially for a development that has a substantial amount of affordable housing. And you know, for me, when I look at a building from across the street, I can't tell if it's 45 feet or 48 feet or even 50 feet. I know it's somewhere up there, but I think there's some flexibilities we have to look at as we continue to look at building residential units. I already mentioned that we need to build within a walkable, bikeable distance. Whenever we have an opportunity to purchase a piece of property to develop, we design a radius with our architects around that 15-minute walk, 15-minute biking, to see what amenities are in the area for shopping, for medical care, for entertainment, to see is it truly walkable where we're going to build. Luckily, Santa Barbara's pretty walkable wherever you go, or bikeable. So we have those opportunities. Other measures that we need to look at that we have been doing on our developments is exceeding California Title 24 energy conservation measures, not just meeting them, but exceeding them. And you mentioned that we have to not disallow gas, but you have a commitment from your housing authority that we're not, even though with that court ruling, we're not putting gas in any future developments. We're all electric. We're looking at microgrids for our own developments as well, to put PV solar with battery backup and all of those systems to make it as energy consumable less, go much less than what's required. We're putting in electric heat pumps for heating and cooling that make developments more efficient and greener. And besides those systems, we also look at, okay, how can the design of the buildings themselves make the units more livable and make them more sustainable with the climate changing, the hot weather that we experience is getting hotter and colder in the winters. So we look at our landscaping as well, the hardscape and the softscape that we design into the buildings. If we can put in lush landscaping with taller trees, that should be, part of the urban forest, which I know we have great street trees programs throughout the city, which is so important to keep the heat down. And if we have those trees tall enough, it brings the cooler air below the tree line and into the buildings if you have the allowable penetrations into the buildings to bring the cool air in. So we're looking at doing more of that. We do reduced parking. Again, I mentioned that we try to discourage automobile use by reducing parking and encouraging non-automobile ownership. There are developments where we allow no parking. And if they're frail senior units, they're not going to be driving a car anyway. And our special needs units, we have enough parking for visitor space and care providers to come on site, but that's it. We want to build as many units as we can. We also are looking at partnerships to continue this. We can't do it all on our own as the housing authority. We're partnering with the school district right now to look at their excess sites so we can build affordable housing for their school district employees so that they can attract and retain both their educators and their other employees that work throughout the school system. We're also trying to work with other developers like the La Cumbra Mall area, the Taylors, and Paseo Nuevo was just discussed Tuesday. We would like to work with Alliance Bernstein to bring as much affordable housing and the type of housing that Santa Barbara needs. So those are the type of partnerships we're leaning into. Partnerships with the city. We have a strong partnership with the city. Like I mentioned, they're giving us the Carrillo Castillo lot to build affordable housing for moderate and middle income. That is really helpful. We just finished 821 State Street, which was the old Sur La Table building. Some people may look at it as a mini Munger because there's no exterior windows, but that's another story. But it offers 14 units that are affordable to low-income and moderate-income people, and it's fully occupied with the residential units, and people there are very happy with their living situation. Now they don't have to commute, they don't have to own a car. Those are the types of adaptive reuse that we need to focus on in the downtown core and make it happen. Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry. I am a relentless houser, and I could go on all day, as Dennis knows. So thank you. I'll be here to answer questions for all of you. Thank you.
Heather and Sully, you want to come up together? We're trying to hold everyone to 5 minutes, but it's a challenge because there's so much information to
We'll
share.
be short.
We've timed it in advance, it's true.
Yeah. Might have to do this at different heights. So this wasn't originally part of my talk tonight, but on my bike ride here, I was traveling on Coda Street, a separated bikeway, when someone slowed down, let some passengers out just as I was passing. This is the first time in my life I've been doored. So the bike hit the car door. I went flying. Luckily I was wearing a helmet into the curb, landed in the mud. So I mentioned this for two reasons. One, because safety is real when we talk about these other types of facilities. And also I'm a little out of it. So if I'm having a hard time with any of these things, I just wanted to mention why. So with this, I think I can put it on the floor. It's dirty enough. So Sully and I are going to be talking about transportation, connectivity, and inclusivity. Transportation is the elephant in the room of the ecological movement. In California, emissions from transportation make up the largest, 40% of total emissions. In Santa Barbara County, that number is 50%, most from personal vehicles. And electric vehicles are not the answer. While they might reduce emissions, they still require costly parking, as was mentioned, ever-expanding roadways, which aren't actually reducing congestion, not to mention they still cause deadly or sometimes just really uncomfortable collisions. So we as a community should be doing as much as we can to encourage walking, biking, and taking transit, which is what these principles are all about. Unless we wish for more floods, landslides, and wildfires, we have to change our behavior as individuals. So this is thinking about each of us in the room and as a society. And we can do this by enhancing the local economy, just what we're talking about here on State Street. So decades of research and case studies tell us that increasing trips by these modes require them to be safe, as I just mentioned, connected, and enjoyable, which is what the design side of State Street is all about. So locally, we have already heard what people want and have studied how they behave. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sully.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Sully. I help run local Strong Towns group. And when I'm not doing that, my day job is a student at Cal Poly. This is actually the second presentation I'm giving today, although this one is not being graded by my professor, which I'm happy about. Third actually presentation this week, but okay, so anyway, so there's an interesting number that's out there that's been established by studies that have been repeated in many cities, and that's that about 60% of Americans say that they're interested but concerned when it comes to biking. And Santa Barbara's own Bike Master Plan did a survey and found a similar number. By the way, it's a beautiful Bike Master Plan, so kudos to whoever put that together. So the primary response when these people are asked why don't they bike, right? They're interested, but they're concerned, so why not, is safety. So similar surveys find that safety is also why people avoid transit, along with connectivity and experience. Those are sort of the three big things. So in other words, people won't bike where they feel unsafe, but where they do feel safe, they will. And the same goes with transit and walking, and obviously Heather's experience is a good example of that. So the good news is Santa Barbara has already achieved something pretty incredible with State Street. There are lots of people biking here, so clearly State Street is satisfying those criteria for all those people. So the data shows us that there have actually been fewer bike and pedestrian collisions since the closure, meaning that State Street really is substantially safer. So Strong Towns, we did a study, and there are copies of it on the back table for whoever is interested. We did a study where we actually stood out on State Street, it's all volunteers, and we just stopped people and said, hey, can we ask you a few questions about biking? So we found that about 30% of those biking downtown said that they were spending money, so they were either shopping or eating. About 20 to 30% say that they were biking on State Street specifically because it was safer than biking somewhere else. And 10 to 12% said they were, simply sightseeing. They were here because it's a nice place to be, similar to why someone might be on the Cabrillo bike path. And also another interesting fact was we asked people their age in groups of 10 because we didn't want to embarrass anybody, but the largest age group was 40 to 50. So, and then followed by teenagers, which people think make up the vast majority, but it was pretty evenly spread actually. So yeah, and all those graphs and all that data is over on that table. So on another note, the ecological guidelines for downtown call for a vibrant and sustainable 15-minute city, which has become a bit of a scary word. But if we want more housing downtown, we have to reduce the cost of housing, and that's already been talked about by people who are much more experts than me. But I'll add one thing, which is that it's hard to fit cars and people all into the small space that we have available. And what's interesting is that for a developer, a parking spot can cost between $20,000 and $60,000 for them to build. And so every parking spot they're forced to build, they still have to make back that money, whether or not the parking is ever used. And also in terms of space, we have that height limit, right? But if you look at some of the new buildings that go up, one whole story of the 4 or 3 that are allowed is parking. So it takes up a lot of space. In fact, 2 parking spots and the lane behind them are about the size of a 1-bedroom apartment. And there's a pretty cool graphic that you can see online that shows that. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Heather.
Okay, so in other words, if we want to achieve our ecological, housing, and economic goals, we need to address transportation head on. It touches on everything, right? And we need to think about the fact that every time we take a trip, we make a decision about how we travel. Sorry, I forgot I'm a little shorter than Sully. Every time we take a trip, we make a decision about how we travel, right? Will we drive? Will we walk? Will we ride our bike? Will we take the bus? And we usually default to driving because driving has been highly subsidized and prioritized for decades, leaving us feeling like it's the only and the natural choice. We hear that all the time. Well, of course we have to drive. But if we want, and this is where these principles become really important, if we want to reduce our ecological footprint, we need to drive less. So when we think about ecological principles guiding the development of State Street, we will need to consider what would lead us to make different transportation choices.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather and Sully. We had a chance in working in the early days on these principles of meeting with every one of the council members and the mayor individually. And one of the things several of the council members said to us, the 15-minute city should be a priority for the whole community, not just the downtown corridor. So there's interest in making this a design decision for the whole area of the city. Steve, please come up and share your wisdom.
How about if I just talk instead? So for starters, I'm probably the group that says, why is the Botanic Garden here when you're talking about downtown? What does that have to do with anything we're talking about today? Well, I think it's really important that we say that this is an ecological framework. We're starting with an understanding that we are part of a larger system, whether it be our transportation systems, our housing systems, our overall sustainability and our energy. This is all interrelated. And the natural world is both at the front of that and at the end of that we need to be thinking about. We already heard, I want to say thank you for not stealing my thunder, but for integrating the fact that native plants and plants in general can help cool our cities and cool our environments. They provide shade and they make it into spaces that we actually want to live. No one wants to live in the concrete jungle. They want to live in the real jungle. Well, maybe close to a nice housing complex anyway. But, so how do we bring nature into our cities? How do we have nature help us cool our cities, provide for wildlife that can come enjoy it, not just for the common invasive rats and other things that are common in our urban environments, but for places for hawks and owls and other things to come help take care of those sometimes common pests. How do we make the space something that we can thrive in as humans, along with that brings in the rest of nature? We make this space something that we can all live. And it starts with incorporating ecological principles into our overall design concepts. That means good transportation. It means good housing, not just for us, but also the living space for the rest of the creatures on the planet. So I will try to get us back on time by ending there. But I want to say thank you all for coming out tonight. It's incredibly gratifying to see this sort of turnout and to see what we're really trying to do. The idea of the framework here is not to say this idea or that plan for this, but to give us a framework of ideas, how we think about revitalizing not just State Street, but all of downtown and even beyond. How do we think about the city we want to live in? And how do we evaluate the ideas that are coming forward? Where do they fit? And what might be being forgotten? So that's what we're talking about here. And I want to thank the organizers. I want to thank CEC. And I want to thank all of our partners that have been involved in this for pushing this forward, because it's really taken an organizing principle to really help us think about how we want to approach downtown. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. You questioned your wisdom, but you certainly won the brevity award. So I want to thank these organizations that have all endorsed the guidelines that CEC has put out there. And we have more that are considering endorsing these guidelines. So we're in the process of trying to gather a groundswell to give support to our council members to enact these principles. And there is certainly interest among the council members, but they need to know that the community is with them. So that's one of our hopes through this discussion tonight. I'd like to maybe ask one question and hope for brief answers from each of the panelists. I think there are mics on the tables, aren't there? There's one. Lelia, one of the things that we have talked a lot about in relation to the guidelines are district systems, district infrastructure systems. You mentioned the microgrid across the street and hopefully more of those, but there's also some for stormwater management, for reducing drought impact, and other such systems. How is your department focusing on these and moving forward with efforts?
Yeah, thank you. In terms of district systems, a lot of cities that have district heating and cooling systems, they were built that way, they were conceived that way. So coming in after the fact is challenging. We have a unique opportunity today with State Street in particular, or any major corridor improvement, where you're really taking it down to the studs, so to speak, and have an opportunity to look at whether district energy systems make sense. In terms of energy generation, our biggest challenge really is the utilities with the infrastructure, right? So the poles and wires, which we're still beholden to even though we're the energy supplier, because it's an antiquated system. We have a 100-year-old energy distribution system. Oh, it's back. That makes it really challenging. And so we're looking at how do we sort of daisy chain these resources, so to speak, right? So equip every building or operation to have its own little microgrid that could maybe daisy chain within a circuit. In terms of stormwater, again, State Street provides sort of a unique opportunity to look at stormwater capture holistically as opposed to site specifically, particularly on State Street where we're building lot line to lot line and capturing the stormwater is very, very challenging. What might it look like if we have some sort of storm capture system that runs down the entirety of what's finally closed at the end? And so we are thinking about that and working with the planning groups to take a look at that. But they're just big challenges, right? It's hard when you're starting with an established area of infrastructure to be thinking in these large scale systems. It requires a lot of boldness and it requires a lot of innovation. So.
And a lot of money.
And a lot of money, yes.
Thank you. Rob, you mentioned about planting and directing air currents, breezes off the ocean. One of the things we've talked about is to really make that effective is not only the planting of trees, but how buildings can harness the direction of breezes. And that new housing needs to not be considered just as one block of new housing, but the whole area needs to be coordinated to get those maximum flows of breezes, both at street level, but also into the buildings for cooling. So that's one thing maybe you could comment on. The other question is the partnership that you alluded to, and I know the Paseo Nuevo housing development that's in the early stages went before City Council on Tuesday, and one of the things that you are hoping will happen through that will be a partnership between your area to provide more workforce and affordable housing for it, but also maybe nonprofits can be brought into some of this stuff and do some seed money to help some elements. So can you comment on that?
Sure, and I'll be brief. The 5 B's, right? Be brief, brother, be brief. So back to the first part of the plantings and and how we design the buildings to capture the airflow and for cooling, that takes folks like you to our good architects that we work with to really be thoughtful about how we design the buildings. A lot of our developments are courtyard design, which really works well if you have those openings at the right area for that airflow to come into the courtyard area and up to the units. And the plantings on site are key. The trees, even from the ground cover to the trees are so key to making that happen. So, moving on to partnerships, that's something historically where we've been a good partner. We've partnered with Mental Wellness Center to ensure they got their development built on Garden Street. We've partnered with Transition House to ensure they could get their building done on Coda. So partnerships are what we're about, and we can't do it all on our own. And if we could leverage the sources of funds that we have access to, along with private capital that's already there, I believe we can truly get much more affordable than just doing the minimums. And that's important for an overall sustainable community.
Thank you. Heather and Sully, you've pointed out how critical transportation needs to be as a part of this. Can you talk a little bit how we can include that in that transportation pattern, bringing people from the outlying areas and especially the people that don't normally come to the downtown area? Some of the people on the east side don't come downtown very often. And that is so important, I think, for the future health and the mix of what the vitality of the downtown should be.
Surely. So I think one thing to touch on is this idea of the 15-minute city, which I know there's been a lot of fear-mongering around it, but basically what it means is that you can get by foot or by bike to most of the destinations you need to get to, at the grocery store, meeting with friends at a cafe. But it also means that there has to be a public transportation system that's connected to it as well. So you might walk 10 minutes to the bus, and then that bus would take you much further away to get to a job that maybe isn't located here in Santa Barbara or something along those lines. The idea is you don't have to get in your car to get anywhere you ultimately need to go. So that's sort of the big picture, the regional picture. But locally, yes, we need to have safe ways of getting from the east side to State Street. And as I physically demonstrated on the way here, they don't currently exist. So it's really about separating people who are traveling different speeds, right? And in my personal case, this was a car that was stopped, and I was traveling. And I think that goes to design, because what we've seen on State Street itself is we have people walking, people bicycling at different speeds, people walking at different speeds. And so we need to figure out the design to separate those users so it's safe for everyone, because I know that's a big issue as well.
Okay. I feel like I'm not as much as an expert as anyone else on this panel. I also did not know I'd be on this panel, but I do know some things. I know I've seen these great maps of Santa Barbara, and the good news about Santa Barbara is the downtown grid area, or not just downtown, the whole grid area, is really within a 15-minute bike ride of State Street. And when you consider e-bikes, it's actually even a bigger area that's in a 15-minute e-bike ride. And so, yeah, I do think it's all about the connections. One really impressive thing the city has already done is the B-Cycle program, which makes using an e-bike far more accessible because they're still pretty expensive. And actually, in one of the other presentations I gave this week, my class is preparing the climate action plan for the city of Morro Bay. And I sort of presented the idea of the e-bike share based on ours. And they were just so into it. So we're already sort of leading in that sense. And I actually think the number is around 100,000 miles that have been traveled by B-Cycle. Oh, over 1 million? Okay, whoa, it's way more than I thought. So yeah, so clearly something is working. But one of the things that I learn about in a lot of my classes, and something I like to read about, is sort of what is that small infrastructure change that will actually get more people to change their travel mode, to actually use the bikes. And it's all about safety and connectivity. So you can build a beautiful Class 4 bike lane. Class 4 is separated from car traffic with some kind of physical barrier. But if it doesn't connect to anything, you're not going to see many people using it. Right? The Dakota Street one, it's great. It's world class, although it could be better, obviously. But it ends 2 blocks before State Street, right? So I think the question that we should be asking, and something that just makes it easy to understand, is like, would you let your kid bike there without you? Right? And so, okay, thank you. It's a good question. So I think on State Street, the answer is yes. And I see it actually all the time. And on the Cabrillo Street bike path, the answer is yes. It's like, okay, so we have 2 spots where the answer is yes, and they're not actually connected. So, okay, there's the first spot we should be thinking about. And then it's like, okay, we want people from the east side. Where are the gaps? And the gap is like, those 2 blocks before State Street where the Class 4 path just ends and it becomes Class 2, which means there is no physical separation. And so, we need more people. And it's not just kids, by the way. It's people who haven't ridden a bike before, older people, my own parents. I know that they won't ride there. I can get them to ride on Class 4, but not Class 2. So it's all about like making those connections. That's my thoughts on that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Great. Steve, talk a little bit about watering pocket parks and additional vegetation, native vegetation downtown, using the condensate from condensers, heat pumps, or traditional air conditioning systems like we were talking about just a little bit before the meeting. Very exciting idea.
So of course, in downtown environments, here in Santa Barbara, we're expecting to see between a 4 and a 5 degree Fahrenheit increase over the next 50 years, right? So it's going to get warmer in the summertime. We're going to need to be running heat pumps and air conditioners and other sorts of things. Well, the byproduct of condensing, or the byproduct of cooling air without changing pressure, is water. It just condenses out of the air, and particularly in a relatively humid environment, which we have much of the time, part of every day in most cases. And so they create hundreds and hundreds, and sometimes a building like this might create hundreds of thousands of gallons over the course of a year of water that could be used and go directly during the hottest times of the year directly to an urban landscape that is needing that water, that then takes that water, transpires it up, and helps to cool that atmosphere. It's a nice closed system loop, and if you add in the native plants that can be a really critical part of that, you're also bringing in wildlife and giving them a source of water that might not be available at any other time. So you're keeping these plants biologically active and available to a larger part of our environment.
Sustainability has always been about solving multiple problems with one approach. Thanks. Let's open it up now. Is there someone that can run the mic around? Oh, thank you, Sigrid.
What do we got?
So put your hand up, and again, questions or comments?
Yeah. It's on. Okay. I ride an e-bike for exercise, and I don't go shopping with it. I've ridden it for 5 years because they get stolen. Even if you lock it, put it in a bike rack in front of a store, they're a high stealable item because they're very expensive. So have you in the transportation division thought about ways that, especially markets, could have some kind of fail-safe locking system so people can use that? Because I'd love to shop with it, but I don't for that reason.
Sure. So, is this on? Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Throughout the world, bike theft is a problem, and it hasn't been completely solved. But there are a lot of better things that we could be doing. For example, bike lockers, bike rooms. So, a grocery store where you're going to have a lot of people that are coming to come and shop with bigger, bikes that are going to be handling heavier loads. We could easily add things along those lines. So, at train stations and places like that. So that would be the biggest suggestion. But in general, it is an issue. The other thing is often just the location of the bike racks. They're often hidden at the back of the parking lot, those sorts of things. So I've found just in the experience I've had with locating places to lock your bike, doing it close to, for example, the registers. So someone can see if someone's trying to steal a bike. That helps a lot as well.
Yeah, I was going to say I agree with what she said. Bike lockers for sure, and I was going to say theft in general. I think there's a big visibility component. So I think a place that does it great actually is Trader Joe's. The bike parking's right next to the front door, and that's right where the security guard stands. So if you're looking for somewhere to shop with your e-bike, Trader Joe's. Not sponsored, but if you haven't had their maple puffs, they're amazing. Yeah.
Next question.
Hi, I'm Margie Bushman, and I think anyone want to ask me a question because I'm been committed to living without a car for 30 years. And I lived in Europe when I was in long time ago and came back with that commitment. And one thing I see is not a commitment to solving what it would take for someone to be comfortable. I used to mention my mother, who was 73, and if it's a hot, sunny day, the bus stops are not comfortable. If it's a rainy day, like the rainy weather that we've had recently, most of them are not covered. And I was at Santa Barbara City College with the Center for Sustainability, and we had a series called Cities as the Solution, Not the Problem. And that was, we examined some cities like Bogota and Curitiba, Brazil, and they worked through those issues. And so I think that has to be solved first. Or you can't ask people to use public transportation when it's uncomfortable. That wasn't a question, but anyway.
Thank you,
I have
Marjorie.
actually done it, and also State Street is a little challenging for me now, as much as I advocated it for years. I just noticed that for some people, they won't go anymore because they feel that nobody's following the rules, or that you don't know where you're safe and how you're safe and who's going to stop. Which with a car, big as it was, people followed the rules, so that's something to consider.
There's a question way in the back. You've been having your hand up for a while.
Okay. Who's in the back?
Yeah, come on up. Thank you.
Thank you. There's been a lot of planning around State Street. We've been to meetings a few times, and the city has a State Street committee working on State Street, and it's a really inspiring discussion. I'm just wondering how this discussion might relate to all the other conversations that are going on about State Street. How's it all going to work together?
Well, maybe I can help with that. We have presented these through the chairman of the State Street Committee, Dave Davis, who's here. It has been filtered to all the members of the advisory committee and to the staff that are working with that. And so that's been filtered into the process, and we will continue to work with them to hold the framework. We want the framework to be an overarching set of principles through which all of the decisions related to all the specifics are filtered through that. And so far we've gotten very positive responses from the framework, and that's because it's easy to agree on general principles. The real work and the conflicts will probably happen in the specifics. And that means we're going to have to stay involved as these general principles are adopted by the city. So that's happened, and we will be meeting with the Sustainability Committee on April 9th, a few of us, April 4th, so thank you, and hopefully taking it from there before the City Council.
Great, thank you so much.
Paul, right in front of you here.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time now in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Santa Fe, New Mexico transformed it's called the Rail Yard, if you're familiar with the city. But central to the Rail Yard is a farmer's market with a permanent enclosed building for some of the foodstuffs. And if, they celebrate the Rio Grande Valley and the agriculture there. But if you think about our area, food is even far more far-reaching in this region. You've got the Carpinteria Valley, the Oxnard Plain, the Santa Clarita Valley, Santa Maria. I feel that food should be celebrated in the center of the city with some something more than a weekend or a 2-day market, something, I don't know, it's a design issue partly, but I'll just leave that thought.
Thank you. Yes. Oh. You're next.
Okay, thank you. John Campanella. Question on housing for the group. It seems that lately we've been concentrating a lot on studios and one-bedroom units to develop because of a need. But looking at sustainability, both being able to afford the rents as well as long-term if your household situation changes and you want to stay in your residence and not have to move out, a thought might be maybe more concentration on 2 and 3 bedroom units. 2 bedrooms, I think many of us, when we first started renting, we had a roommate. We didn't have our own residence. So it's an ability to share and have less cost for non-related individuals. And secondly, for families. The families grow out of 1 bedrooms or even 2 bedrooms. So a 3 bedroom might be the idea in order to allow people to stay longer. I think the average rental household size in the city is about 2.25 people. For sales, about 2.5. So there's not much difference. So there is a need for unrelated and related people to rent. And I was wondering if anyone had seen or done a study to see what's more sustainable. 1 person for each kitchen and bathroom or shared facilities within those residences. Thanks.
John, shared facilities are probably more efficient, for sure. We were just talking last night at the commission meeting about some of our upcoming developments where we are now focusing on large family because we've admittedly over the past 2 decades we focused on seniors and special needs where they only need a studio and we could build more of them, but we've kind of neglected the large family. So 200 North La Cumbra, we're building a mix of 1s, 2s, and 3 bedrooms. 25% of the units are going to be 3 bedrooms there. Same with our 15 South Hope Avenue. It's going to be a large family development with a mix again of 1s, 2s, and 3 bedrooms. So we need to encourage a mix of bedroom sizes to meet the needs of community residents. And I do like the idea of shared housing as people age in place perhaps and can have more room for a caregiver and that sort of thing.
The new development on De La Guerra, on Gutierrez, Soltara, they have 2 and 3 bedroom units in there. I think 18 of each out of a total number of units. That's 72, I believe, is the total. So, that's happening. And that's been a concern as the state has tried to tell us we have to do a certain number of housing units in the city, whether they'd all be studio or single bedroom ones, because 1 unit, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 bedrooms, only counts as 1 with the state. Yes, oh, good.
Hi, my name's Jet Black Mertz. I have a question about incentives for landlords. What sort of incentives can you provide to landlords who already own units? They're not looking to tear it down and rebuild something new in the forward-thinking way that Rob's talking about. What can you do for those landlords with the sort of older buildings that they'd like to redo?
Well, a couple of ideas. So we have really good working relationships with the landlord community, good tie-in with the apartment rental association, and they've been the backbone for our voucher program, taking in our voucher renters, and a lot of landlords have come to us as they've aged and said, we want to sell you our building because we care about our residents and we want to make sure they're taken care of, number one, and that way they don't have to worry about the day-to-day, and they'll do a seller carryback note with us, and they essentially receive an annuity, and then we take ownership, we rehab the units and make sure they're kept up and they're affordable. So we have that program in place that we try to advertise with the landlord community through our newsletters and whatnot. But I do also think that there needs to be more incentives for encouraging existing landlords to not only take care of their existing residents, but take care of their properties to rehab them appropriately. So I don't know what that looks like, though. It's, yeah.
I can comment on that. Is it on? Okay, it's hard to tell. So one of the big benefits of bringing electrical supply in-house, so to speak, with the city doing it, is that those dollars stay here in our community as opposed to being distributed throughout SCE's territory or to their shareholders. And that means that we can create incentive programs. So we have done so. Santa Barbara Clean Energy launched its first self-funded incentive program in November, offering EV incentives. So that was not to landlords per se, but as an example. And then in this next fiscal year is really looking at driving home electrification. So how do we provide landlords with incentives to upgrade their kitchens, for example, which are a huge source of methane, which is very toxic to inhabitants. So kind of that chain, solving multiple problems, like Dennis was saying. The big challenge we're having, though, that some cities are succeeding to solve, and we're still trying to figure out is, so you give them this money to upgrade, are they then going to increase the rent or rent eviction or, right, all of these things? So how do you create a program that says, we'll pay for you to do this, but you've got to keep the tenants in place or cap your rent. That, you know, so we're trying to noodle through that a little bit, but it's really complicated. But yeah, so SBC is a great incentive resource.
Hello. Hi. I'm a bike commuter, sorry, as well. I was really excited to hear someone bring up bike lockers tonight, because I moved from the Bay Area back in August, and using my bike and Caltrain and BART was a huge portion of my getting around. And every Caltrain and every BART station had bike lockers, which was amazing. So I could go and either take my bike on the train or park it there and go different places, even get to the airport and whatnot. So my first question is, because I've been calling actually Amtrak and the Santa Barbara airport to see about whose responsibility it would be to get bike lockers at locations like this, to allow people to have sustainable transit, to then use sustainable transit to get other places. So first question, and then I'm also curious, I'm a graduate student at UCSB, what the plans are for further connectivity kind of outside of downtown too, because I know we've talked a lot about getting kind of around downtown, but what about getting to Goleta or towards Ventura and other things like that? Thank you.
So I'll start with that and then hand it over. So my department would be the one to contact for bike lockers. We actually operate the Bike Spot in Granada Garage, which you can get a membership for, and it's very cool. It has showers, bike tools, all sorts of neat stuff. And then we're continuously looking for new locations to do that. We've been looking at the Amtrak station and other innovative bike locker facilities. As you know, one of the questioners and then Heather was talking to, it's paramount to keep especially expensive e-bikes safe so that we can encourage people to use them. So yeah, go ahead and contact us. In terms of connectivity, my department also runs the B-Cycle bike share program, which does have a big gap in that it only covers city of Santa Barbara. We're fortunate in that the founder of the program lives in Santa Barbara and so has a special place in his heart for Santa Barbara, and is eager to move into Goleta and Carpinteria and other areas of the county, but it's just been a challenge to negotiate with them. We've really welcomed that regionality because we're not going to get uptake, right? It wouldn't make sense to have a different bike share program in Goleta and then you switch back again at the airport, right? So really trying to push B-Cycle, which is owned by Trek, to move that program out, and it's just costly. So figuring that out. But I did want to address also the how do we bring people from the east side and west side into downtown. We did just receive a $1.5 million grant to expand B-Cycle specifically to low-income customers and riderships. So we're really excited about that.
Great.
Yeah, well, just two things. One, there is, we're planning on in the spring having a conversation. Sorry. There is a plan to discuss bike lockers because a lot of people are doing them in different places, and during the pandemic, a lot of that fell apart. So that is a conversation that will be taking place. But I think sort of bringing it back to the idea of State Street or the idea of principles, I think it's really important to remember that not only when people are going to the grocery store, but when they're taking transit is a great place to incorporate safe bike parking. So you take the bus, but maybe your ultimate destination is, or especially more likely the train, your ultimate destination is a mile away. You don't want to be hauling your bike on the bus every day. So the new Goleta train station, and anything that we design downtown here, we should be thinking about, would this be a transit location? And then let's have some secure bike parking as part of that as well.
As far as your question about connectivity outside of downtown, I mentioned the Santa Barbara Bike Master Plan. That's within the city. But yeah, they have a whole outline of all the projects that they want to build. If you want to take a look, one of them is like the Cliff Drive Vision Zero project, which is advancing. But in terms of connecting like UCSB to Santa Barbara, obviously that's more difficult because you have Santa Barbara, county, then Goleta, then county. So you have different jurisdictions that you're going through. And so it's harder. I know that the MODOC path, I don't know as much about it as some people, but it's been a big controversy that's kind of been solved. Of course, it's interesting to me that the people who live right next to where that path will go, are very against it. But obviously it's a region-wide benefit. So, and of course, when they built the highway through Santa Barbara and went through all those jurisdictions, they didn't ask anybody. So if that was okay, right? And so they prioritized the connectivity of the region over whatever local people thought. And so it's an uphill battle with, obviously, the connectivity of the bike paths. But there is hope. Like, that path will connect from UCSB all the way into town. So,
thanks.
Yeah, my name is Aaron Richter. First of all, thank you guys for putting this together, and all the initiatives that you're highlighting here are awesome, and it seems like you really have a good vision for what we want to do from the CEC perspective. I'm just curious, what do you see as some of the primary obstacles to accelerating this and moving these initiatives forward? Curious if it's awareness of the public. Are there city council members that are against some of this progressive kind of sustainable transportation, sustainable urban housing planning, or is it funding, or like what is your, and maybe that you each have different answers to this question, but what are the major obstacles, and then how can we as a community help you move some of those things forward?
All right, so I think the first step, State Street is a great microcosm. It is a great model. It has our community attention, and we want to do it right. And so in many ways, we need to prove that it's possible. And so I think that a great first step is to do something on State Street. It's a small region, it's a small distance, it's not going to solve all the problems, but if we can try some things out and it can become an incubator for what's possible and what works, will build enthusiasm in our community to go further. But this seems like the right first step, but not the last step.
That was a great answer. I'm not an expert on this, but I am, I do advocacy, so I can say I think, it's my opinion, but I think the public process around State Street can be a little bit opaque. That's my own, being involved in it. I think, there's the SSAC, and people are confused why they're not making decisions that are happening right now in their city council, and the meetings are often during working hours like 2 p.m., and so it's confusing for a lot of people, I think, to get involved. On the other hand, a positive note, I think there is general consensus, right? The city has done surveys where they found that a vast majority of people sort of agree that they don't want cars, and various other things that people agree on. So there is the consensus. It's then just a question, from what I see, is like how to actually get people involved, and also how to talk about what matters, like where there are opinions, and versus I see a lot of people talking about or wondering about facts that are sort of already out there. And so, we have a case study also on the back table, which people might be interested in about another city. So it's like the conversation is very broad right now, right? Like what's good for the economy or what's not? And it's like, well, some of these things, there's evidence for them, right? It's like, is this safe or is it not? Well, we kind of know it is, versus like, what should it look like and stuff like that. So it's a really broad conversation right now too, which I don't think helps with making like very specific decisions.
Yeah, I think I would touch on two things. One, having principles, having an example is a great way to start. I don't think as a community we're all actually committed to these principles. So that's one thing to say, what is it that matters to us and how do we move forward? As was mentioned, the details can become really tricky. And when it comes to details, I think we need to spend a lot of time getting everyone educated on the facts. So, we hear a lot of things such as too much money is being spent on bikeways and, versus, repaving streets. But no one really understands that those bikeways cost, next to nothing compared to street repavings. So if we start to really understand what the costs really are, or what the cost is to the environment by not allowing people to travel in different ways, or how much time you're actually delayed if we turn a two-lane street into one lane for bikes and one lane for cars. So there's things along those lines, just sort of having these conversations and really getting down to the facts. And then just, being willing to share and change and try different things out. That's always hard. So we have to make baby steps. We have to, be in community and talk about these things. But I think that would really help.
What she said. Yeah. So regarding housing on State Street and downtown, I really believe we need to define a solid adaptive reuse policy at the city to make things happen for housing in these older buildings. Our 821 State Street, that was used as a test model. That's one of the reasons the Housing Authority jumped in. We wanted to see it used as a test as well, to show it can be done. But then that building is unique in and of itself because the second floor is concrete, the ceiling's concrete, the walls are concrete, which allowed us to do the number of units and not have a problem with fire code. I've heard that these other older buildings that aren't like that, which most of them are not like that, have issues with the fire code. So we have to really work closely with the city to really find out how we can make things work. And these adaptive reuse, it's not cheap to do. It's difficult to even take an existing structure, a shell, and outfit it with the 14 units that we put in. So adaptive reuse policy. We also need, as any developer or builder knows, we need quick processing through the entitlement process to get the permits. That's a killer even for the Housing Authority. We need that. Thankfully, the city has created a new ombuds person to shepherd these developments through the process. If you have a problem, you can call that person and they'll help you through it. So that message has been heard, and they are implementing some efficiencies.
And just to address your question, I think that to really emphasize something Heather said, change is hard. And that's what we're asking with this framework, right? We're asking for a lot of change. It's expensive change. It's changing behaviors we've held on to for a century. It's changing systems that are decades and decades old. I mean, it's a lot of change. So I think, as Steve said, this is 100% the best first step. But there are a lot of steps in between, right? Looking at established plans, looking at protocols, policies, behaviors, attachments, and educating. So this is the kind of gathering that is required to bring the community along. They need to happen all over the city in different languages. And then that's how you really build consensus.
Well, you guys can keep this.
Sorry, you don't need it.
Change is difficult, but one of the things that may be helping us is that change is going to come to us no matter what, with what we're facing. And we don't really know what that's going to be. But that's one of the things we're trying to at least start looking forward and trying to get a handle on some elements of it. And we'll have to keep adjusting and adopting. But change is coming, and we're going to have to either change or not, and we'll be in big trouble if we don't. I want to thank the panels. We're running out of time, but you guys have been great. More disciplined than I expected. And there's a sign-up sheet somewhere, I think, in the back that if you'd like to keep hearing from those of us that have worked on this, when events are coming up and critical meetings, we will email you. So do sign up. We're also speaking in front of some of the commissions and boards of the city. We've had a number of conversations with the Historic Landmarks Committee. We're about to start having those conversations with the Planning Commission. And it's really helpful to have support from the community appear at these events when we're talking about the guidelines. I would also thank all of you for coming, and I'd like to turn it over to Sigrid to close us out here.
That was really a fantastic conversation, you all. Thank you. And thanks for giving up your Thursday evening for this vibrant discussion. We're all the way to the back of the room. We talked a lot tonight about housing, and we talked a lot about biking. So 2 events for you. March 19th, that's that Dr. Trislyn Nelson talking about bike data. So please come attend. That's in the evening. And then one I didn't tell you about because we don't have the materials quite ready, but advance notice, May 9th. We're doing another piece on sustainable housing, so building out sustainable housing. And if you want to hear more from Rob, come to that event. If you liked what you heard here tonight, please consider supporting CEC. You can do that online. Quick donation at cecsb.org, along with our calendar is also on cecsb.org. There's also a high probability, we live up to our name, Community Environmental Council. High probability you come as an audience member, you could end up on the panel. So please, thank you all.